Katie Sullivan ran through the tall grass behind her house, her blonde hair bouncing with each step. The 8-year-old girl loved playing in the fields of New Haven Colony. The morning sun felt warm on her face as she chased butterflies between the corn rows. "Katie, don't go too far," her mother Maria called from the vegetable garden. She was picking tomatoes for lunch, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "I won't, Mom," Katie shouted back, giggling as a blue butterfly landed on her nose. She stood very still, watching it flutter its wings before flying away toward the distant hills. New Haven was a peaceful place. The human colony sat on the edge of known space, far from the busy trade routes and big cities. 3,000 colonists lived simple lives, growing food and raising animals. They sold their crops to traders who came through the system every few months. John Sullivan worked in the grain storage facility near the center of town. He was a big man with gentle hands and kind eyes. Every morning, he kissed his wife and daughter goodbye before walking to work. Every evening, he came home to find Katie waiting by the front door. The colonists felt safe under the protection of the Galactic Empire. The massive alien government ruled thousands of worlds across the galaxy. For over 1,000 years, the Empire had kept peace between different species. They had rules about trade, laws about war, and systems for solving problems. Commander Alex Rodriguez lived in the military outpost on the hill above town. He was responsible for protecting the colony from pirates and other dangers. His small team of soldiers kept watch over the peaceful farmers below. Most days, nothing happened. The commander filed reports about crop harvests and weather patterns. Rodriguez was a veteran of several small conflicts on the frontier. He knew how to handle raiders and smugglers. But he had never fought against Imperial forces. No human had. The Empire was too powerful, too vast. They controlled technology that humans barely understood. On this particular morning, Rodriguez sat in his office reviewing supply requests. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. The paperwork was boring, but necessary. Every bullet, every meal, every piece of equipment had to be accounted for. His assistant knocked on the door. "Commander, we have ships approaching the system." Rodriguez looked up from his reports. "What kind of ships?" "Imperial Patrol, sir. 3 vessels. They're requesting permission to land." This was unusual. Imperial ships rarely visited New Haven. The colony was too small and unimportant to attract their attention. Rodriguez felt a knot forming in his stomach, but he tried to stay calm. "Grant them permission. Send them to the main landing pad." The Imperial ships were sleek and silver, much larger than anything humans built. They landed with barely a sound, their advanced engines humming quietly. The ships looked like weapons even when they were just sitting on the ground. Captain Zexthara stepped out of the lead ship. She was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Her people, the Valorians, were known throughout the galaxy as skilled warriors. They made up a large part of the Imperial military. Behind her came a squad of soldiers. They carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. Their armor was black and intimidating. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never lost. A battle, Rodriguez walked down from his outpost to meet them. He wore his best uniform and tried to look official. His own soldiers followed at a distance, unsure what to do. "Captain Zexthara," Rodriguez said, offering a formal salute. "Welcome to New Haven. How can we help you?" The alien captain looked down at him with 4 cold eyes. "Commander Rodriguez, we have received reports about illegal trade activities." "Illegal trade?" Rodriguez was genuinely confused. "We file all our trading records with the Imperial Commerce Board. Everything is legal. Our records show that you have been selling grain to unauthorized systems." Rodriguez shook his head. "That's impossible. We only trade with approved merchants." "I can show you our records." By now, a crowd of colonists had gathered to watch. They stood at a safe distance, curious about the alien visitors. Children peeked out from behind their parents' legs. Katie Sullivan was among them, her bright eyes wide with wonder. "Your records may be incomplete," Captain Zexthara said coldly. We have evidence that grain from New Haven was found on Kepler Station. That facility is not authorized to purchase human agricultural products. John Sullivan pushed forward from the crowd. Captain, we don't choose where our grain goes after we sell it. The merchants handle distribution. Human ignorance is not an excuse, the captain replied. Your colony is responsible for tracking all agricultural exports. Maria Sullivan held her daughter's hand tightly. She didn't like the way the alien soldiers were looking at the humans. Their weapons weren't pointed at anyone, but they were ready to use them. We can work this out, Rodriguez said. If there was a violation, we'll fix it. We'll implement better tracking systems. The Empire does not negotiate with violators, Captain Zexthora stated. New Haven will pay a fine of 50,000 credits. Future violations will result in more severe consequences. 50,000 credits was more money than the entire colony earned in a year. Rodriguez felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. Captain, that's unreasonable. We can't pay that much. Then you should have followed imperial law. The argument continued for several minutes. Rodriguez tried to explain that the colonists were innocent. Captain Zexthara grew more impatient. With each human excuse, her soldiers shifted restlessly, their hands never far from their weapons. Katie Sullivan watched the aliens with fascination. She had never seen beings from another world before. Their strange appearance and advanced technology amazed her. While the adults argued, she took a few steps forward for a better look. Katie, stay back, Maria whispered. But her daughter was already moving. The little girl walked closer to the Imperial soldiers. One of them, a young Valorian private, noticed her approach. He had been trained to see threats everywhere. The sudden movement of a human child toward his position triggered his combat instincts. Stop, the soldier commanded, raising his weapon. Katie froze, confused by the harsh tone. She didn't understand why the alien was pointing his gun at her. She was just curious, not dangerous. I just wanted to see, she said in her small voice. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger. In his mind, the human child was a potential threat. His training said to eliminate all threats immediately. He didn't think about her age or innocence. The energy blast hit Katie in the chest. The powerful weapon, designed to stop armored soldiers, vaporized her small body instantly. She died without making a sound, her bright smile disappearing forever. The colonists screamed in horror. Maria Sullivan's cry of anguish echoed across the landing field. John Sullivan ran to where his daughter had been standing, finding only scorched grass and a small pink shoe. You killed her, he sobbed, holding the shoe against his chest. She was just a child. Captain Zexthara showed no emotion. Your offspring should be better controlled. This incident was preventable. Rodriguez stared at the scene in shock. He had seen death before, but never like this. Never so pointless and cruel. His hands shook as he tried to process what had happened. She was 8 years old, he whispered. Age is irrelevant, the captain replied. She approached Imperial forces in a threatening manner. The crowd of colonists pressed closer, their grief turning to rage. Rodriguez's soldiers moved to keep them back, but he could see the fury in their eyes. Everyone had loved Katie Sullivan. She was the colony's bright light, always laughing and playing. We're done here, Captain Zexthara announced. Remember this lesson. The Empire will not tolerate violations of any kind. The Imperial ships lifted off, leaving the colonists to mourn their dead. Rodriguez knelt beside John Sullivan, who was still holding his daughter's shoe. There were no words that could make this right. Within hours, Rodriguez had sent a full report to Earth Command. The message included security footage of the incident, showing Katie's death in horrible detail. The quantum communication system carried the news across light years in minutes. On Earth, the report reached the highest levels of government. President Linda Carter watched the footage with growing horror. The death of an innocent child at the hands of Imperial forces would not go unanswered. The Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had shown humanity what they really thought of human life. Now they would learn what humans thought of justice. The emergency meeting began at dawn. President Linda Carter sat at the head of the long table in the Global Defense Council chamber. Her face was pale and drawn from a sleepless night. The report from New Haven had reached her just 6 hours ago. Around the table sat the most powerful people on Earth. Military commanders, government ministers, and colonial representatives had rushed to the capital. They all looked tired and shocked. None of them had expected to be discussing war with the Galactic Empire. "Play the recording again," President Carter said quietly. The holographic display showed the landing field on New Haven. Katie Sullivan walked toward the Imperial soldiers, her small face full of curiosity. The weapon fired. The child disappeared. Her father fell to his knees, holding her shoe. Several people in the room looked away. General Patricia Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, clenched her fists. She had grandchildren the same age as Katie Sullivan. "How many times have we watched this?" asked Dr. Susan Blake, the Secretary of Colonial Affairs. Her voice was shaking. "Not enough," President Carter replied. "Every person in this room needs to understand what we're dealing with. The Empire killed an 8-year-old girl for walking toward them." Admiral Frank Miller of the Earth Space Navy leaned forward. He was a big man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Madam President, we need to discuss our options carefully. The Empire has ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They control technology we can barely understand." "Are you suggesting we do nothing?" General Hayes asked sharply. "I'm suggesting we think before we act," Admiral Miller replied. "The Empire has fleets that could destroy every human world in a week. We have maybe 200 ships spread across 30 systems." Dr. Blake nodded in agreement. "We should pursue diplomatic channels first. The Empire has procedures for handling incidents like this. We can demand justice for the soldier who killed Katie." "Justice?" President Carter's voice was cold. "Did you see Captain Zextharis' reaction?" She showed no remorse. She blamed the child for her own death. Secretary of Defense Robert Kane spoke up. "The Empire considers us a minor species. They won't take our protests seriously unless we have something to back them up." "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Blake asked. "I'm suggesting we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best," Kane replied. "We need to mobilize our forces and show the Empire we're serious." President Carter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun was rising over the capital city. Millions of people were starting their daily routines, unaware that their government was discussing war with the most powerful force in the galaxy. "Tell me about our military capabilities," she said without turning around. Admiral Miller opened his tablet. "We have the 3rd Fleet based at Luna Station. That's our main battle group, 47 ships, including the carrier Enterprise. The 5th Fleet protects the outer colonies with 32 ships. The rest are scattered across human space." "What about ground forces?" General Hayes answered. "We have about 500,000 soldiers spread across all our worlds. Most are colonial defense forces with basic training. Only about 50,000 are real combat troops. And the Empire? Conservative estimates put their total forces at over 10 million ships and billions of soldiers," Admiral Miller said grimly. "They've been building their military for centuries." Dr. Blake leaned forward. "This is why we need diplomacy. A military solution is impossible." President Carter turned back to the table. "Show me the recording one more time." The hologram played. Again, Katie Sullivan walked toward the aliens. The weapon fired. The child died. "She was curious," President Carter said softly. "She wanted to see something new and different. That's what children do. They explore, they ask questions, they trust the world to be safe." The room was silent. "The Empire killed her for being a child," the president continued. "They showed no mercy, no regret, no humanity. They treated her like a pest to be eliminated." "Madam President," Dr. Blake tried again, "we can demand compensation. We can ask for reforms in imperial procedures." "You think money will bring Katie Sullivan back?" President Carter asked. "You think promises will stop them from killing more children?" "It's better than starting a war we can't win," Dr. Blake replied. President Carter sat back down. Admiral Miller, in your professional opinion, could we hurt the Empire militarily? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. In a direct confrontation, no. But if we use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, targeted strikes, we might be able to cause some damage. Enough to make them negotiate seriously? Possibly, but the cost would be enormous. We'd lose most of our fleet and many of our colonies. General Hayes spoke up. The Empire relies on their reputation for invincibility. If we showed the galaxy that they can be hurt, other species might join us. Or they might crush us as an example to others, Admiral Miller countered. President Carter looked around the table. What message are we sending if we do nothing? What does it tell every human child in the galaxy? That we're reasonable people who choose diplomacy over violence, Dr. Blake said. That we're cowards who won't protect our own children, General. Hayes replied. The argument continued for hours. Dr. Blake and her supporters wanted to try diplomatic solutions first. General Hayes and the military leaders wanted to prepare for war. Admiral Miller remained torn between his duty to protect humanity and his knowledge of military reality. Finally, President Carter called for silence. I've made my decision. The room went quiet. Dr. Blake, you're right that diplomacy is usually the better path. But this isn't a trade dispute or a border disagreement. This is about the fundamental value of human life. President Carter stood again. The Empire killed Katie Sullivan because they could. Because they don't see humans as equals. Because they think our lives don't matter. She walked slowly around the table. If we accept this, what happens to the next human child who gets to? Close to Imperial forces? What happens when they decide one of our colonies is inconvenient? We have to draw a line somewhere, she continued. We have to say that some things are unacceptable. The murder of children is one of those things. Doctor. Blake made one final attempt. Madam President, please consider the consequences. Millions of people could die in a war with the Empire. Millions of people will die if we teach the Empire that human lives are worthless, President Carter replied. At least if we fight, we die with dignity. She returned to her seat. Admiral Miller, you're authorized to mobilize the entire Earth. Space Navy, General Hayes, begin preparing our ground forces for extended operations. Secretary Kane, put all defense industries on wartime production schedules. Are you declaring war? Dr. Blake asked in shock. I'm declaring that humanity will not accept the murder of our children, President Carter said firmly. If the Empire wants war, they'll have it. The President activated the communication system. This is President Carter. I'm calling an emergency. Session of the United Nations. Representatives from every nation and colony are to attend. 3 hours later, the UN General Assembly was packed. Representatives sat in stunned silence as President Carter showed them the recording from New Haven. Katie Sullivan's death played on screens around the world. The Galactic Empire has shown us what they think of human life, President Carter said. They killed a child for the crime of curiosity. They showed no remorse, no regret, no recognition that they had done anything wrong. The assembly was completely quiet. We can choose to accept this. We can file protests and hope for better treatment in the future. We can teach our children to fear aliens and never approach them. President Carter paused. Or we can show the galaxy that human life has value, that we will not accept the murder of our children, that there are consequences for treating us as less than equals. She took a deep breath. I am formally declaring war on the Galactic Empire. Every human world, every human ship, every human soldier will be committed to this fight. The assembly erupted in shocked voices. Some representatives cheered, others protested. Most sat in stunned silence. Admiral Miller watched from the gallery. He knew the president had just committed humanity to a war they probably couldn't win, but he also knew she was right. Some things were worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. The news spread across human space within hours. On New Haven, John and Maria Sullivan heard the announcement in their empty house. John held Katie's favorite toy while Maria cried. She didn't die for nothing, John whispered. They'll remember her name. The war had begun. 3 months after Katie Sullivan's death, Earth looked like a different world. The Luna shipyards worked day and night, their lights visible from the planet's surface. The sound of construction never stopped. Sparks flew from welding torches. As workers built humanity's first true war fleet, Admiral Frank Miller stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the controlled chaos below. Hundreds of ships were under construction. Some were nearly finished, their hulls gleaming in the artificial light. Others were just skeletal frameworks, waiting for armor and weapons. "How many will be ready by next month?" he asked Captain Ryan Brooks, his chief of staff. 57 ships, sir." "Including the new heavy cruisers," Brooks replied. He was a young officer with bright eyes and steady hands. The war had given him opportunities he never expected. "Good, we'll need every one of them." The ships being built were unlike anything humans had made before. They were bigger, faster, and more heavily armed than the old exploration vessels. But most importantly, they were designed to fight aliens. Dr. Karen White walked into the observation area, carrying a thick folder of technical reports. She was the head of the new weapons development program, working 18-hour days to give humanity an edge. "Admiral, we have a breakthrough," she said, barely containing her excitement. "Show me." Dr. White activated a holographic display. "We've been studying the Imperial energy shields from the wreckage at Kepler Station. The shields work by creating a field that deflects incoming energy." "We know this already," Admiral Miller said patiently. "But they operate on specific frequencies." Dr. White continued, "If we can match those frequencies, we can disrupt their shields completely." She pressed a button. The hologram showed a simulation of human weapons hitting Imperial shields. Normally, the shields would deflect the attack. But with the new frequency modulators, the energy blasts passed right through. "How long until we can install these on our ships?" Admiral Miller asked. 2 weeks for the prototypes. "A month for full production," Dr. White replied. Captain Brooks looked impressed. "This could change everything." "It's a start," Admiral Miller said. "But we need more than better weapons. We need intelligence." Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morgan had been working on that problem. He ran the new intelligence division, focused entirely on gathering information about the Empire. His agents were already spreading across Imperial space. Morgan walked into the meeting room where Admiral Miller was reviewing battle plans. He looked tired but determined. Intelligence work was dangerous, especially when dealing with aliens who saw humans as inferior. "Colonel, what do you have for me?" Admiral Miller asked. "The Empire is mobilizing, but slowly," Morgan reported. "They don't see us as a real threat yet. Most of their fleets are still in peacetime positions. How many ships are we facing?" "In this sector, maybe 2,000. Spread across dozens of systems," Morgan said. "But Admiral, they're not taking U.S. seriously. Their commanders think this is just a minor rebellion." Admiral Miller smiled grimly. "That's exactly what we want them to think." The colonies were responding to Earth's call for help. Transport ships arrived daily, carrying volunteers from every human world. The men and women came from farms, factories, and frontier outposts. They all wanted to fight for Katie Sullivan. Commander Alex Rodriguez had left New Haven to join the Earth Space Navy. He couldn't stay on the colony where Katie had died. The memory was too painful. But he could fight the people who killed her. "I want to be on the first attack," he told Admiral Miller during his assignment interview. "You're not thinking clearly," Admiral Miller replied. "Your emotions are clouding your judgment." "Sir, I watched that little girl die. I saw her parents' faces. I need to make this right." Admiral Miller studied the younger officer. Rodriguez had experience with Imperial forces, which was valuable. But he also had personal reasons for fighting, which could be dangerous. "I'll put you on the USS Retribution," Admiral Miller finally said. "Captain Brooks will keep you in line." The USS Retribution was humanity's newest warship. It was 3 times larger than the old exploration vessels, with armor thick enough to stop Imperial energy weapons. The ship carried 200 crew members and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Captain Brooks took command of the Retribution on a cold morning in March. The ship was beautiful in its own way, all sharp angles and aggressive lines. It looked like what it was, a weapon built for war. "Take us out," Brooks ordered from the bridge. The Retribution moved away from Luna Station with surprising grace for such a large ship. The crew was young and eager, trained specifically for this mission. They had studied Imperial tactics and weaknesses for months. Dr. White had installed her new frequency modulators on the ship's weapons. If her calculations were correct, the Retribution could punch through Imperial shields like paper. But they wouldn't know for sure until they faced the enemy. President Linda Carter watched the ship's departure from her office on Earth. She had made the decision to go to war, and now she had to live with the consequences. Every person on that ship was there because of her choice. "Madam President, the Imperial Ambassador is here," her assistant announced. Ambassador Quintal entered the office with obvious displeasure. The alien diplomat was tall and elegant, with silver skin and cold eyes. He represented the Empire's interests on Earth. "President Carter, this military buildup is concerning," he said without greeting. "The Empire is prepared to overlook your recent declaration if you return to peaceful behavior." "The Empire killed a child," President Carter replied calmly. "There will be consequences." "One human child is not worth a war," Quintal stated. "Your species lacks perspective." President Carter stood up. "Get out of my office. I beg your pardon." "You heard me. Get out. And tell your empire that humanity is done being reasonable." The ambassador left in confusion. He had never been dismissed so rudely by a minor species. The Empire would not be pleased. Meanwhile, Captain Brooks was leading the Retribution on its first mission. They were heading for the Imperial supply depot at Kepler Station, the same facility that had been mentioned in the original trade dispute. "Long-range sensors show 3 Imperial ships guarding the station," reported Lieutenant Sarah Davis from the sensor station. "What class?" Brooks asked. 2 patrol boats and a heavy cruiser," Davis replied. "The cruiser is Valorian design, same as the ships that visited New Haven." Commander Rodriguez felt his jaw tighten. The Valorians had killed Katie Sullivan. Now they would face human justice. "Battle stations," Captain Brooks ordered. The Retribution approached Kepler Station carefully. The Imperial ships were arranged in a defensive formation, but they weren't expecting trouble. Their shields were at minimum power, and their weapons were offline. "They're not even watching for us," Rodriguez observed. "Overconfidence," Brooks sighed. "The Empire thinks humans are harmless." The attack began at maximum range. The Retribution's main guns fired in sequence, sending streams of energy toward the Imperial ships. Dr. White's frequency modulators worked perfectly. The energy beams passed through the Imperial shields like they weren't there. The first patrol boat exploded instantly. The second tried to raise its shields, but the disrupted frequency made them useless. It died just as quickly. The heavy cruiser was tougher. Its armor absorbed several hits before cracking. But without shields, it couldn't survive the Retribution's firepower. The Imperial ship broke apart, its crew dying in the vacuum of space. "Kepler Station is defenseless," Lieutenant Davis reported. "Destroy it," Brooks ordered. The station's destruction was spectacular. The massive facility broke apart in a chain of explosions, sending debris flying in all directions. Supplies meant for dozens of Imperial outposts were vaporized in seconds. "All Imperial forces in the area are eliminated," Rodriguez reported with satisfaction. "Signal Earth Command," Brooks said. "Mission accomplished." The news of the victory spread quickly through human space. The first battle of the war was a complete success. 3 Imperial ships destroyed, a major supply depot eliminated, and no human casualties. On New Haven, John Sullivan heard the news while working in his empty house. For the first time since Katie's death, he smiled. The Empire was learning that actions had consequences. Admiral Miller received the battle report with mixed emotions. The victory was important, but it was just the beginning. The Empire would respond with force, and humanity would face their first real test. "One battle won," he told his staff. 1,000 more to go. The war was truly beginning. The Empire's response came faster than expected. Commander Vexkara of the Imperial Sixth Fleet received the news about Kepler Station with complete shock. He stood in his command center staring at the destruction reports. 3 Imperial ships destroyed, a major supply depot eliminated. The attackers had vanished without a trace. How is this possible? He demanded from his intelligence officer. The humans used some kind of new weapon technology, the officer replied nervously. Our shields were completely ineffective. Vexkara was a veteran commander who had served the Empire for 30 years. He had fought rebellions before, but nothing like this. Minor species usually attacked with primitive weapons that barely scratched. Imperial armor, this was different. Mobilize the 3rd battle group, he ordered. We're going to crush these humans before they get any more ideas. The Imperial response was swift and brutal. Battle fleets moved toward human space from 3 directions. The Empire wanted to end this rebellion quickly and demonstrate what happened to species that challenged Imperial authority, but humanity was ready. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morgan's intelligence network had been tracking Imperial movements for weeks. His agents sent coded messages about fleet positions and attack plans. The information flowed back to Earth Command in real time. They're sending 1,200 ships, Morgan reported to Admiral Miller. 3 separate fleets, all converging on the outer colonies. Admiral Miller studied the tactical display. Red dots showed Imperial forces moving through space like a deadly tide. Blue dots marked human positions, far fewer in number but positioned strategically. They're taking the direct routes, Miller observed. No subtlety, no surprise. They think they can overwhelm us with pure numbers. Can they? Asked Captain Brooks, who had returned from the successful Kepler Station mission. Not if we're smart about it, Miller replied. We can't match their firepower, but we can make them pay for every system they take. The first major battle occurred at Riverside Colony, a mining world on the edge of human space. The colony had been evacuated weeks earlier, but the orbital stations remained operational. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the small defense force, 8 ships. Against an Imperial fleet of 60. Hayes was a skilled tactician who had studied every available record of Imperial combat methods. She knew her ships couldn't win a direct fight, but they might be able to hurt the enemy before dying. Remember, we're not trying to hold the system, she told her captains over the communication channel. We're trying to make them bleed. The Imperial fleet arrived in perfect formation, their ships arranged in the classic battle pattern that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries. They moved with the confidence of forces that had never faced serious opposition. Human ships detected, reported the Imperial sensor officer. 8 vessels in defensive positions around the 3rd planet. Admiral Texmara commanded the Imperial force. He was young for his rank, promoted quickly due to his family connections. He had never fought humans before, but he didn't expect any real challenge. Destroy them, he ordered casually. We have more important targets to reach. The battle began at long range. Imperial ships fired their main weapons, sending massive energy beams toward the human defenders. But the humans didn't stay still. They moved in unpredictable patterns, using the planet's gravity to change direction quickly. Captain Hayes watched the Imperial formation with satisfaction. They were flying in straight lines, following standard tactics. Human ships were smaller and faster, able to dart between the massive Imperial vessels like insects around giants. All ships, target their weapon systems, Hayes ordered. Don't try to destroy them, just disable their guns. The human ships attacked in coordinated groups, focusing their fire on specific Imperial vessels. Dr. White's frequency modulators worked perfectly, allowing human weapons to penetrate Imperial shields. The damage was significant. 3 Imperial ships lost their main weapons in the first exchange. 2 more suffered engine damage. The humans were fighting like nothing the Empire had seen before. What are they doing? Admiral Texmara demanded. Why aren't they engaging us properly? They're using hit-and-run tactics, his tactical officer replied. They strike fast and then retreat before we can return fire? The battle continued for 2 hours. The humans couldn't win, but they were making the Imperial victory very expensive. Every Imperial ship suffered some damage. 5 were completely disabled. Finally, Captain Hayes received the signal she had been waiting for. "All ships, withdraw," she ordered. "We've done our job." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Imperial forces in possession of an empty system. Admiral Texmara claimed victory, but he knew the truth. The humans had hurt him badly with far fewer ships. Similar battles occurred across the frontier. Human forces couldn't stop the Imperial advance, but they made every victory costly. Imperial commanders began to respect human fighting ability, even if they wouldn't admit it publicly. The war escalated when Dr. White's research team achieved another breakthrough. They had been studying captured Imperial communication equipment, looking for weaknesses in the Empire's coordination systems. "We can disrupt their communications," Dr. White explained to Admiral Miller. "If we broadcast on the right frequencies, we can jam their signals across entire star systems." "For how long?" Miller asked. "Maybe an hour before they adapt," White replied. "But an hour without communication could be enough." The new technology was first tested during the Battle of Centauri. Station. Captain Brooks led a strike force of 20 ships against an Imperial supply convoy. The convoy was heavily guarded, but the humans had surprise on their side. "Activate the communication jammers," Brooks ordered as his ships approached the Imperial. Formation. Instantly, the Imperial ships lost contact with each other. Their coordinated tactics fell apart as individual captains tried to respond to the human attack without guidance from their commanders. The USS Retribution led the assault, its weapons cutting through Imperial shields like paper. The other human ships followed, targeting the supply vessels while the Imperial escorts struggled to organize a defense. "Their formation is breaking apart," reported Commander Rodriguez from the weapons station. "They can't coordinate their response." The battle was over in 30 minutes. 12 Imperial supply ships were destroyed along with 6 escort vessels. The humans withdrew before Imperial reinforcements could arrive, but the Empire was learning. 2. After losing several more convoys to human attacks, they began to adapt their tactics. Imperial ships started traveling in smaller groups, making them harder to find and attack. Commander Vexkara received new orders from Imperial High Command. The humans were becoming a serious problem, and the Empire wanted them eliminated quickly. "We're going to attack their colonies directly," he told his staff. "If they want to play guerrilla games, we'll give them something to really worry about." The Imperial strike on Riverside Colony was meant to send a message. Even though the colony had been evacuated, the orbital facilities remained. The Empire destroyed everything: mining platforms, communication arrays, even the small memorial that colonists had built for Katie Sullivan, but the Empire made a mistake. They broadcast the attack on galactic communication networks, showing the destruction of the species across the galaxy. They wanted to demonstrate Imperial power and the consequences of rebellion. Instead, they showed the galaxy what humans were fighting against. The images of destroyed homes and shattered dreams spread through alien societies. Many species began to quietly support the human cause. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan's intelligence network expanded rapidly. Alien sympathizers provided information about Imperial movements and plans. The humans suddenly had eyes and ears throughout Imperial space. "We're not alone anymore," Morgan reported to Admiral Miller. "At least 6 species are secretly helping us." "Good," Miller replied. "We're going to need all the help we can get." The war was entering a new phase. The Empire had superior numbers and technology, but humanity had something more important: the moral high ground. They were fighting for justice, for the right to exist without fear, for the memory of a little girl who had died for no reason. On New Haven, John Sullivan continued working in his empty house. He had received updates about every battle, every victory, every defeat. The war was being fought in his daughter's name, and he took comfort in knowing that her death had meaning. "They remember you, Katie," he whispered to the empty room. "The whole galaxy remembers you." The Empire was about to learn that killing human children had consequences that no amount of military power could erase. 1 year after Katie Sullivan's death, the war had changed everything. The Galactic Empire, which had ruled unopposed for 1,000 years, was struggling against a species they had once considered insignificant. Human forces had destroyed hundreds of Imperial ships and disrupted trade across dozens of systems. Ambassador Quintal stood in the Imperial Council chambers on the capital world of Valeria Prime. The magnificent hall was filled with representatives from 1,000 species, all part of the vast Imperial government. Today, they were discussing the human problem. The rebellion must be crushed, declared High Admiral Ziegthan, the Empire's supreme military commander. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke. These humans are becoming an inspiration to other minor species. The humans have proven more resourceful than expected, Quintal admitted reluctantly. Perhaps we should consider negotiations. Negotiations? Ziegthan's voice rose in anger. The Empire does not negotiate with rebels, we destroy them. But privately, many Imperial leaders were worried. The humans had shown tactical brilliance that surprised even veteran commanders. Their technology was advancing rapidly and their morale remained strong despite heavy losses on Earth. President Linda Carter received daily reports about the war's progress. The news was mixed. Human forces had won several important victories, but the cost was enormous. Nearly half of humanity's warships had been destroyed or damaged. "We can't keep this up forever," Admiral Miller told her during their morning briefing. "We're running out of ships and trained crews." "How much longer can we fight?" President Carter asked. "Maybe 6 months at our current rate of losses," Miller replied honestly. "After that, we'll be down to planetary defense forces." But the president had received other news that morning. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan's intelligence network had intercepted Imperial communications about peace negotiations. The Empire was finally taking humanity seriously. "They want to talk," Carter told Admiral Miller. "The Imperial Council is prepared to discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" Miller asked suspiciously. "They're offering to acknowledge the incident at New Haven and provide compensation to the Sullivan family," Carter replied. "In exchange, we stop all military operations and return to our previous status." Admiral Miller was quiet for a moment. "It's not enough." "I agree, President Carter." Sad. They still don't understand what this war is really about. The Empire's first peace offer was rejected within hours. President Carter's response was broadcast to every human world and leaked to alien sympathizers throughout Imperial space. The message was simple. Justice for Katie Sullivan meant more than money. The war continued with renewed intensity. Captain Brooks led the USS Retribution on a daring mission to capture an Imperial communication hub. The facility controlled military communications for an entire sector, making it a valuable target. "Intelligence reports show light defenses," Commander Rodriguez briefed the crew. "The Empire doesn't expect us to attack this far into their territory." The mission succeeded beyond expectations. Human forces not only captured the communication hub, but also retrieved important intelligence about Imperial fleet movements. More importantly, they discovered the location of Captain Zexthara's ship. "She's commanding the Imperial 4th Battle Group," Lieutenant Colonel Morgan reported to Admiral Miller. 12 ships stationed at the Kronos system. Admiral Miller studied the tactical data. Zexthara was the Valorian captain who had killed Katie Sullivan. Her capture would be a major symbolic victory for humanity. "It's a trap," Miller concluded after reviewing the intelligence. "The Empire knows we want her." "They're using Zexthara as bait," maybe, Morgan replied. "But it's also our best chance to get justice for Katie." The mission to capture Captain Zexthara required the largest human fleet ever assembled. 30 ships under Captain Brooks' command jumped into the Kronos system. Ready for the fight of their lives, the Imperial forces were waiting. Captain Zexthara had positioned her ships in a defensive formation around the system's main planet. She knew the humans were coming and was prepared to fight them. "Human ships detected," reported her tactical officer. 30 vessels approaching from multiple vectors. Zexthara smiled coldly. The Empire had given her additional ships for this battle. She commanded 24 vessels, nearly equal to the human force. This would be the decisive engagement that ended the rebellion. Today we finish this, she announced to her fleet. The humans will learn the price of challenging Imperial authority. The battle began at maximum range. Imperial ships fired coordinated volleys at the approaching human fleet, but the humans had learned from a year of warfare. They moved in unpredictable patterns, using every advantage their smaller ships provided. Captain Brooks led the attack. Personally, the USS Retribution cutting through Imperial formations like a sword. Dr. White's latest weapons modifications were devastating. Human ships were now almost equal to Imperial vessels in firepower. Target Zexthara's flagship, Brooks ordered. We need her alive. The battle raged for 3 hours. Ships exploded on both sides as the two fleets tore each other apart. The humans fought with desperate courage. Knowing this might be their last chance for justice, Commander Rodriguez managed the Retribution's weapons with deadly precision. Each shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy Zexthara's ship. The human crew worked together like a machine, driven by the memory of a little girl who had died for no reason. Finally, Zexthara's flagship suffered critical engine damage. The ship was dead in space, defenseless against human boarding parties. Captain Brooks led the assault team personally, determined to capture the alien captain who had started this war. Surrender, Brooks demanded as his Marines surrounded the Imperial bridge crew. Zexthara looked at the human soldiers with undisguised hatred. The Empire will never surrender to inferior species. You're not the Empire, Brooks replied. You're just a murderer who killed a child. The capture of Captain Zexthara sent shockwaves throughout Imperial space. For the first time in galactic history, a high-ranking Imperial officer was held prisoner by rebels. The Empire's reputation for invincibility was crumbling within days. New peace negotiations began. This time, the Imperial delegation was led by High Admiral Ziegfeld himself. The Empire was finally ready to take humanity seriously. The negotiations took place on a neutral space station. President Carter led the human delegation, accompanied by Admiral Miller and John Sullivan, Katie's father. The presence of the grieving parent was intended to remind everyone why the war had started. The Empire is prepared to make significant concessions, High Admiral Ziegfeld announced. We will acknowledge our responsibility for the incident at New Haven and implement new protocols to prevent similar tragedies. What about justice for my daughter? John Sullivan asked quietly. Ziegfeld hesitated. The Empire had never surrendered personnel to alien justice before. But the human military victories had forced them to consider options they had never imagined. Captain Zexthara will face trial under human law, he finally agreed. The soldier who fired the weapon will also be surrendered to human authorities, President Carter nodded. That's a start. But we also need guarantees that human children will never face such danger again. The final treaty was signed in the same place where Katie Sullivan had died. The ceremony took place on New Haven, in the exact spot where the little girl had fallen. Representatives from across human space attended. Along with Imperial officials and alien observers, the Treaty of New Haven established new rights for human citizens within Imperial space. It created mechanisms for resolving disputes without violence and guaranteed protection for civilians, especially children. Most importantly, it recognized humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. Captain Zexthara's trial became a galactic sensation. The proceedings were broadcast to every world in Imperial space, showing alien species what human justice looked like. The trial was fair, thorough, and focused on establishing truth rather than seeking revenge. The Valorian captain was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The soldier who had actually fired the weapon received a lesser sentence, but was also held accountable for his actions. John and Maria Sullivan attended every day of the trial. They listened as witnesses described their daughter's final moments. They heard experts explain why the shooting was unnecessary and criminal. Finally, they had the justice they had sought. Katie would be proud, John told his wife after the verdict was announced. She would want the galaxy to be safer for all children. The war officially ended with a memorial service for all those who had died. Katie Sullivan's name was carved in stone at the head of the list, the child whose death had changed the galaxy. Her parents placed flowers at the memorial while Admiral Miller gave a speech about courage and sacrifice. President Carter spoke. Last, Katie Sullivan died because the Empire thought human lives didn't matter. Today the galaxy knows better. No child will ever again die for the crime of curiosity. As the ceremony ended, children from New Haven played in the same fields where Katie had once run. They laughed and explored, protected by the peace their friend's death had purchased. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was safer, Admiral Miller watched the children play and thought about the lessons of war.